The Pentagon now says more than 100 service members suffered traumatic brain injuries in last month's attack on the Al Assad air base in Iraq. A week after the attack, the Defense Department reported 11 troops had suffered brain injuries. That figure was revised to 50 by the end of the month. And last week, the number more than doubled to 109. Officials say those rising numbers were a result of a, quote, abundance of caution. But in a piece for the New York Times, experts suggest there may be a bigger problem driving the delays in reporting. They say there is, quote, no reliable way to determine who has a brain injury and who does not. For more on this, let's bring in Dave Phillips. He's a national correspondent for the New York Times and one of the authors of the article. Welcome, Dave. Thanks for being with us. So why is it so difficult to diagnose brain injuries, specifically in the military?
Well, for a long time, for more than 10 years, the people who lead the military have been calling brain injuries invisible injuries for good reason, that you can't see them. It's not like a broken bone where you can take an x-ray and say definitively, yes, this service member has an injury and this one does not. And so that's led to them trying to find alternative ways to try and diagnose. And for the most part, that's by asking the patient questions. Did you get hit on the head? Did you see stars? Did you pass out? For how long? Do you now have a headache? Do you have trouble concentrating? Are you irritable? And there's a number of problems with that. One of them is that people can lie, both to get out of work and to stay at work. And another one is that even people who are trying to be completely honest may not answer the questions right.
So complicated. And Dave, apparently more than 350,000 brain injuries have been reported in the U.S. military since 2001. So clearly this is...
that's right. And that's to say the least. There may be many more. So what the military wanted to do is find a definitive way to diagnose this. Something that would be like an x-ray so they could definitely say, yes, this person's injured. Because the last thing they want to do is try and shortchange anyone. And starting about 2010, they poured hundreds of millions of dollars into finding that silver bullet. And they are on the cusp of finding this thing, and they have not found it yet. So researchers tell us that within a few short years, there could be a blood test or a brainwave test or even like a saliva test that could very quickly say, yes, this person is injured. But right now, they're not there.
Oh, that would be so great, not just for the military, but for sports as well, if they could figure that one out.
Right. You can imagine that what if the school nurse or the school coach had that saliva test that they could use at anywhere where someone might be injured.
That would be unbelievable. Now, I'm curious about the gear, though, Dave, because gear used to protect troops from bullets and shrapnel has gotten much better over the years. So why are we still seeing such a large number of brain injuries?
Well, one of the things is that people who are no longer getting taken out by bullets because they're now behind armor are still getting hit by blast waves. So you may have a young service member who's repeatedly exposed to one blast after another. That happened a lot in Iraq and Afghanistan, and yet they're walking around, they seem fine, and there's no good way to assess how injured they are. And a similar thing, it sounds like, happened at Al Assad Air Base. You know, people were in bunkers. They were protected from flying debris, but they were not protected from that shockwave from the missiles that were coming in.
Right, and they probably didn't have their gear on either. Isn't that right?
Well, I think some of them did, but you know, imagine putting on a helmet and then getting blown out of a guard tower that's right next to a missile, and you can totally understand how that might not be enough.
Absolutely. And so, Dave, you write that doctors often don't know, because they haven't figured out how to get there yet, whether a patient has a minor concussion or a brain bleed. So what do the treatment options then look like for service members who need help today?
So if you are in a hospital type of setting, they can give you a CT scan and find out if you have a brain bleed. The problem is there's all sorts of very serious brain injuries that don't get to that level. And there's all sorts of people serving in the military that are nowhere near a hospital with a CT scanner. So you have these medics in the field who are trying to sort out, okay, who needs to be taken off of duty and maybe flown in the case of Al Assad, they flew dozens of people to Germany. who needs to have that happen and who maybe just needs a day's rest.
Right.
And that's where the problem comes in, because you have fairly young medical personnel sometimes making these decisions, and there's a heck of a lot of reason for them to say, you know what, you're fine,
Right.
walk it off. And that may be true, or there could be something very serious going on, and they may not know.
And if something is serious, what kind of long-term effects can these injuries have?
Oh, boy, like a broken bone, there are so many different outcomes. The brain is the most complex organ in the body. And so if different parts of it are injured in different ways, it can affect all sorts of things. It can alter your personality. It can affect your mood or your memory. It can affect your motor function. Now, there are medication and rehabilitative therapies that you can do, but first you have to identify.
All right. Well, Dave Phillips of the New York Times, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.